In this election year, China is likely to be a hot topic of political debate. Is President Xi Jinping and members of his Communist Party friendly competitors or enemies of the West? Our next guest contends the CCP is killing Americans and destroying our way of life without firing a shot. Peter Schweizer, president of the Government Accountability Institute, is author of the new book, Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. Peter, congratulations on another #1 bestseller. And I know 2 years ago you gave us a New York Times bestseller with Red Handed, which exposed how American elites get rich helping China. With Blood Money, you dig a little deeper. You contend the United States is already in a hot war with China. Our leaders are passive about it. Explain what's happening and why.
Yeah, I mean, China has a strategy. They call it disintegration warfare that says, look, we don't want to have a kinetic fighting war with the United States because that would lead to all kinds of disruption and damage in China. So we're going to try to beat them by not going to war, but by undermining them nonetheless. It's an idea as old as Sun Tzu, the strategist, who said the best strategist is the one who defeats his enemy without actually having to fight him. They're doing this by sowing social chaos in the United States. They're literally killing Americans with fentanyl. The Mexican cartels are the junior partners. This is a Chinese operation. And they are engaging in other activities that are designed to tear America apart. And it seems to be working.
Well, let's get into this with a look at some of our politicians from both parties. Let's begin with President Biden. I know for at least 5 years now you've conducted extensive research on Biden family connections to China. The president says he's had no involvement in his son Hunter's business, but you contend he has profited. How?
He's profited because his family's profited. And we need to remember that the bribery and corruption statutes in the United States say even if the actual politician doesn't get a dime, if his family member profits, that in and of itself is corruption. And that's what's happened in this case. When you look at an issue like fentanyl, Joe Biden will not confront China on this issue. He said there will be no finger pointing. I think the reason is because of these financial connections. A Chinese gang called UBG is responsible for setting up the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and making them the kings of fentanyl. They send more of this poison into the United States than anyone. The head of this Chinese gang is a gentleman who goes by the name White Wolf. Chang An Li is his name. White Wolf has a business partner who gave the Bidens in 2017 a $5 million forgivable loan that the Bidens have never repaid. So you literally have 1 degree of separation between the first family of the United States and this poisonous fentanyl trade. Joe Biden does not want to have a conversation about this because of those entanglements and how poorly it would reflect on his family.
Well, who else? How about the vice president, members of Congress?
Yeah, well, you could look on the Republican side. Senator Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is sort of DOA on these issues as well. He'll say some tough things about China, but he won't actually do anything. And the reason is that his wife, Elaine Chao, her family owns a shipping business called Foremost Shipping. That has essentially been set up by the Chinese government to grow and expand rapidly. They've worked together since the early 1990s. What that means, of course, is that the families become wealthy, but it also means that if Mitch McConnell as a senator were to do or say something that particularly angered Beijing, they could destroy the family's shipping business overnight. That's the kind of leverage they have and the kind of leverage that they use.
And what percentage of Congress are we talking here that they have leverage over?
I think there's a handful of people. The larger issue, I think, is more a reflection of D.C.'s political culture, and that is we have a lot of national leaders who want to be there. They're kind of go along to get along. Once you realize what China is doing and you look at the facts of how they are killing Americans, really over the last 5 years that they're responsible for the deaths of several million Americans. Once you confront that reality, you can't have business as usual with China. That means making very hard and difficult choices. So some of our leaders are engaging in what Winston Churchill calls looking at our enemies with vacant eyes. They kind of know what's going on, but they don't want to confront the reality because it would make their jobs much, much more difficult.
How about Donald Trump? Now, some people say he's also profiting from business with the Chinese. What did you find?
Yeah, Donald Trump doesn't have any direct financial ties to China, and he's actually, when he was president, was pretty tough on China. I think the one note of caution there is that, Donald Trump probably overestimates the ability of his personal diplomacy to get results with President Xi of China. Remember, in 2018, President Xi promised that he was going to deal with the fentanyl issue. President Trump, applauded him for that and effectively declared victory. The problem is that nothing changed. President Xi lied to him. So the hope, of course, would be that if Donald Trump is reelected, that he would have learned that lesson and not take President Xi at his word and when he makes these promises.
And Peter, last year we saw a spy balloon pass over the continental U.S. before it was shot down off the South Carolina coast. And you mentioned Chinese fentanyl pouring over our southern border from Mexico. So tell us some more about how business and political connections compromise U.S. national security.
Well, it creates a circumstance where large sectors of our business community, particularly Wall Street and big tech, become lobbyists for China. When President Trump was in office, he imposed tariffs on Chinese goods and products. The Chinese didn't go to Washington, D.C. to lobby against it. They instead went to New York and to Silicon Valley, and they went to American businesses and said, guess what? You are going to go and lobby Washington and get them to end these policies, because if you don't, it's going to cost you business in China. So they're able to take some of our business leaders and effectively turn them into lobbyists to lobby our politicians and do their bidding, which is a very, very dangerous and divisive situation for our country to be in.
Okay, up next, more with best-selling author Peter Schweizer and a look at the funding of the transgender movement and the Marxist plan to radically transform America.